Welcome to the Three Voices podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Blue, and we are here to talk about our experiences that might be labeled as psychotic, including voices, mania, paranoia, and unusual beliefs. Some of us have been hospitalized and been given diagnosis. Some of us have not. We are free to use any language we want to explain our experiences and extreme states, including salty or triggering language, and some people will describe their experiences as positive, spiritual, or supernatural. We're here to share and listen and learn, so it's okay if you hear things you agree with or disagree with. It's okay if you like your meds, don't like your meds, or aren't taking any meds. It's okay if you like your doctor or hate your doctor. We respect a diversity of views. Please do not believe or disbelieve anything that we talk about here. Just be open-minded and do your own research. With the occasional exception, we are not professionals, doctors, or therapists. We are not giving advice. We are simply peers who are telling our personal stories and sharing our own experiences from our perspectives. It is our hope to share what we have gleaned from our experiences and from our gathered knowledge, the same knowledge that you yourself can find through sources such as the internet, books, and other media. We will always put links in the description below so that you yourself can do your own research. If at any time you believe that you have anything that needs to be treated or diagnosed, we recommend that you see a professional and seek out help. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm Jamie Brasington. I'm also known as Jamie Blue on the Three Voices podcast. If you hear anything that is kind of interesting and you want to delve into it further, just similar to peer support, I'm not going to give you everything, but in the description there, I will put links and other resources for people to dive deeper if you find something that you're more interested in yourself, because I'm going to talk about a lot of different topics. First, a little bit about who I am. I'm fairly new to the peer world. I only came to the peer world in April of 2017. I started working in peer support in January 2018. So this is a world that I find my passion in, but I really wished I had known about sooner. I thought that the only way to find help was through a therapist, a counselor, a hospital. And they all told me that I had to reject my spirituality unless it was Christian, and that was okay. That actually was what broke me more than anything. So when I found the Rock here in Salem, and I found NAMI first, and then I found Voices and Visions, and then I found everything else. And so that kind of saved me and allowed me to re-embrace my spiritual side. Since then, I now facilitate both NAMI and Voices and Visions groups, and thank you. And I also host this podcast, and the podcast is a living library for pathways to recovery. And recovery doesn't look the same for everybody. One of the reasons I do both NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, and Hearing Voices Network is because I feel that denying someone their spiritual experience is incredibly harming, but denying someone their medical experience can be extremely harming as well. And several people will start out in one group and eventually will go to both groups. And if somebody's going to transition during their life, having somebody who's safe to transition with is good. So I tend to be there for people during those transitions because I'm willing to accept them wherever they're at. And I personally feel that I have parts of my life that are distinctly mental illness and distinctly spiritual. And I accept that for myself. I'm never going to tell anybody else what they're experiencing. So the scholar, artisan, and priestess are my thrive types. And I put these here because thrive types is something you may never have heard of. It is something I did a podcast about. But these are archetypes that describe me, and they're archetypes that clash. A scholar is somebody who's incredibly focused, incredibly driven, loves to study, wants to dig to the root of things. A artisan will have 1,000 projects, wants to dig into everything, never really gets to the root of anything. Those clash a lot, and they'll fight a lot. And the priestess is my third. A person's third archetype is the archetype that they most relied on when growing up. And that's what I'm going to be addressing. The priestess is now my back pocket card. It's the thing I pull out and use, but it's not the thing I rely on. The artisan and the scholar are what I rely on now, and the podcast is how I get to do that, because they can work together, because I can dig to the root of a topic with someone, a guest on my podcast, and then I get to go to the next one, and I get to dig to the root of the next thing. And I get to do that with everything from metaphysical to political to the medical model to everything, anything I want to. And it allows me to satisfy both, whereas until now, they've been fighting together in my head like a dog and a cat. And I just thought it was something wrong with me. And I finally found somebody who helped me work through the fact that no, it's supposed to be this way. You just got to find a way to let them work together. So I put those up there because I have a pretty good idea that I'm not the only one who deals with that kind of a thing. My spirituality. I used to say that I was not contemporary. My belief system is not contemporary. And I'll still say that up front, but then I describe it and I have a lot of people who are like, they're on board with me. So I'm agnostic, philosophical, chaos mage. Agnostic, I believe that nothing is known or can really be known about the existence of God or a divine, or really the existence of anything. We're all experiencing reality from our own little bubble, which means your reality is different than the person next to you is different than mine. And it's all flavored and tainted by your experiences. So the knowing is not so important as much as the experiencing. Philosophical is that my life is devoted to the study of the fundamental knowledge, the study of that reality, shared by all and shared by the experiences. So mine is not so much about the knowing, but the study and the experience. Chaos mage. So chaos magic. The contemporary magical practice, sometimes referred to as success magic or results-based magic, described as a union of traditional occult techniques and applied postmodernism, particularly a skepticism concerning the existence of knowability, of objective truth. Chaos magicians subsequently treat belief as a tool, often creating their own idiosyncratic magical systems, frequently borrowing from other magical traditions, religions, movements, popular cultures, and various other philosophies. The takeaways from my system is that nothing, to me, I believe, nothing can really be known. I'm devoted to the study, not the knowing. Skepticism concerning the existence of knowability is the key. Objective truth, that's the whole point. Like, question everything. I walk into every situation with the understanding that I probably don't know. And I learned a lot more that way. So belief, I treat belief as a tool that can be applied to things, which in a magical practice, which magic is incredibly different to everybody and can be incredibly fluid. So I do create my own magical system, and that itself is very fluid and changes, and I also challenge myself with that. And yes, I do borrow. I've studied and lived various religious pathways, and I've learned the parts of those things that spoke true to me and didn't. And if they don't speak true to me, I put those parts down, and I take with me what has spoke true to me. And I'm always wanting to learn more. That part of my soul will always be hungry, and as long as my soul is hungry to learn, then I'm alive. My path. I see my path now as being the hero's journey. If anybody's a writer, you're taught that the hero's journey it's a very distinct path. I like the hero's journey as similar to the tarot cards, that it's kind of fun to switch things up, but that if you can identify where you are in your life on the hero's journey, then you can look back and see what you've gone through, and then start preparing on what steps you need to do in order to complete the cycle. But know that it's a cycle. It never stops so long as you're breathing. And that's a good thing. They don't always have to be incredibly horrifying events. They can be small events. Mine started off with a lot of trauma, and some of that was inherited. I had a lot of things that were trained into me, both good and bad. And for a long time, I did believe that I had a cursed birth. And that totally fits that whole fantasy series. But it's also the spirit's journey. if you look at the hero's journey, it overlays with the spirit's journey. And if you believe in the spirit, it's a fantastic overlay to help you understand that I realized while I was sitting in a Voices Visions class that this is going to be the year of my enlightenment, and I made that decision. And then from then on, I started following this one. It worked for me. It's not easy. So my childhood, these next few slides are from a video game called Little Nightmare. And they fit because I had the recurring nightmares. After my trauma, I say that it awoke gifts in me, but it also triggered nightmares and night terrors and sleepwalking. And these shots portrayed that. Until adulthood, I had nightmares about warped and twisted bathrooms. And I also had an issue where for a long time I felt like I was trapped inside my head with a little brain controller, which now I have a 5-year-old who's about to turn 6 who tells me that he has a brain controller. And I'm now able to tell him how I work with my brain controller, and it's working with him. But it's interesting that these things that tortured me as a kid, people are now making millions of dollars off of, and I really wish that I had thought about being more honest about my stuff sooner. The thing is that through these nightmares, I would tell my mom and dad these nightmares, and I give them all of the detail, and my dad figured that through all of his obsession with comic books and X-Files and sci-fi and kung fu, that he thought I might be a gray child, that I was maybe cosmic. And so he pointed out that I was born under some very strange and bizarre circumstances. My birth itself was an incredibly traumatic birth. When I was born, I had gray-white eyes and pure white hair, and I was allergic to everything. I was incredibly sick for the first year of my life. But as soon as I stopped being sick, I was able to hold a complete conversation with all of the adults, which means that I have a little brother because he's the only planned child because they needed to give me someone to talk to. But these are also all the signs of the hero's birth. So if you ask any good writer, all of the signs of peculiarity, I bet you if you look in your own, you can find the hero's journey. Trauma is in the beginning of every great Disney movie. If you find me a Disney character that doesn't have some sort of what would be considered a voice, a vision, some sort of mental illness, then it's not a good Disney movie. It's probably not actually on film. They all have some animal that they talk to, some ancestor that they talk to. They all have something that somebody else does not see that they talk to. And they all have some trauma in their past that's gotten them to where they are, and they also have some mission that they're fighting toward. And that's the ones that we love. So my dad saw potential for a gray child, and he wanted to unlock that. So I became his experiment. He started training me at age 6. Training was intense meditation training. He walked me through some guided exercises to unlock psychic powers. He taught me to go through my mind and find the box and open the box in order to grab out the star. And once I had the star, he would test me for psychic abilities, for telekinesis, for telepathy, for astral projection. He did this for like a year, and while he did this, my mom was teaching me lucid dreaming to help with the nightmares. Because if I could identify that I was in a dream, that I could stop and turn and tell the boogeyman to go away. Because at that point, I was also sleepwalking. So I would walk, and in my dream, I distinctly remember like dreams of stoplights or spotlights shining to show me where to walk. And if I stepped off the path, I would hurt myself, and I'd wake up in the morning with a gashed foot. Now, we were carnies, so sleepwalking in the carnival is not so grand.
Oh my goodness.
Has anybody played Five Nights at Freddy's or heard of Five Nights at Freddy's? Okay. I lived that in the carnival. When you wake up from the night terror in the carnival by yourself in the middle of the night, surrounded by animatronics and rides. Again, I really wished I'd been more willing to talk about my experiences and open up because they made a lot of money. But I'm hoping this will work with this one. We had to construct a memory warehouse in order to stash some of those horrifying dreams in. And in the memory warehouse, it was just a home that he had me build one hallway, one doorway, one room at a time inside my head. It also became a safe space to be, because before that it was just this room that I was stuck in with this brain controller. Well, now I had a way to get away from the brain controller and go hide in my head when life sucked. And life sucked a lot at that point. So, as an adult, there was a point where I used to say that The Dreamcatcher by Stephen King was my favorite movie. And everybody was like, what are you talking about? And the reason why it was my favorite movie was for this one less than 2-minute scene about the memory warehouse. If everybody's okay, I'd like to show you this clip. Because personally, when I find something in media that matches what I've experienced, I really celebrate it. Okay, so through all this, eventually as an adult, I went back and looked at everything that my dad had worked with me through, which he did this until he eventually got bored, which took about a year. And then we were in the carnival and he had too much to do. So I went back and he had given me like a lot of comic books to read through and a lot of videos to watch. And I figured out eventually that he was trying to get me to be Jean Grey. Yeah, honestly, if I could have, I think I would have. His eventual goal was to get me to be the Dark Phoenix because he wanted to have control of the powers of the Dark Phoenix. The thing is I've been told that is crazy. Having somebody train a 6-year-old, 7-year-old through how to unlock and develop psychic powers in order to create the Dark Phoenix from a comic book is crazy. But the incredible meditation abilities that they gave me, and the safe space it gave me in my head, and the ability to file away my memories until I could later, at a later date, deal with the trauma that I was going through, saved my life. So he handed me a foundation through what would have otherwise been absolute absurdity. Her powers were telekinesis, telepathy, astral projection, and eventually she fused with an alien being who wanted to take over, conquer, destroy the Earth. It's a fun storyline if you like X-Men. But the thing is that in all those practices, he wanted me to have more power, and I didn't have enough, as shown by the tests. So he had me develop doors with locks on them, which a lot of people know that I have keys, that I always carry keys, and that keys are gifts. But maybe I haven't always been so open about the fact that the keys are tied to those doors, because keys have such significance to me. Because he would walk me through creating these doors so that I could cut through time and space in order to enter another dimension, to find my mere self, because I could find the resonating energy to find myself, enter her mind, find her little box, and steal her power, assuming she hasn't already accessed it, or he hasn't already accessed it. And then flee back, shut the door, and lock it before they figured out what the hell's going on, because I'm essentially stealing their life essence. So that I can then fuse it with my own, and become a more powerful psychic. And this was done hundreds of times during the course of this year. And then he left me alone. The thing is he didn't know that this created pounding on the other side of the doors from pissed off versions of myself, and the sensation that I was being pulled between realities, and that I could feel when they went through extreme events, and voices that were telling me that if I didn't XYZ, they would rip me through that door into theirs, and I would be stuck inside their body. And it, in the mind of a 7-year-old kid, who is at this point moving every 30 days, has some severe issues going on, because I didn't know what to say, because he was excited anytime I shared it with him, because it was proof to him that it was working. So I stopped telling him, and I kept it to myself, and I suffered with this shifting reality problem. And now it's just like I still feel like I'm shifting realities. I still have days where I feel like I can sense something that's going on with somebody else. I feel like I'm tied to another person. And I just accept that that's just part of how my brain functions now. And it does not make it pleasant. But the funny thing is, the doors are still in my head. This is what caused me to stop working with my dad overall. I figured out that he was the bad guy because I didn't want to steal from them. And he told me it's not stealing if it's you, because you're stealing your own life essence. It's just a different timeline. So that was what essentially took that bond between me and my dad. Was I figured out that he was the bad guy in the story. So this is the depiction of what I felt like I was going through. That's Jean Grey, who herself was being tortured by feeling all of herself through all of the different universes. So he succeeded in some ways, but not in exactly the ways he wanted. And then he left me alone in the carnival to wander around completely confused and have fun. Fun. So if you look at the mirroring, because was I crazy or was I going through an incredibly spiritual experience and then being abandoned? Because having all of these rules that were being given to me by these spiritual entities, like I would be on a merry-go-round and I'd count how many times I went around, and then I had to go backwards because I had to stay on the same plane. Nobody could walk between me and the person I was with because they would split and I could feel the ripples go between us. I'd literally run in a circle and go back. So it created OCD-like tendencies. Having always moving and then having the shifting realities, I felt like maybe I was a doppelganger in the wrong reality, or maybe everybody around me was a doppelganger. I stopped having connections with my family. They were gone at 5 a.m. to go work at the fair, and they didn't come back till 1. I stopped even staying in my own trailer. I just would stay wherever, and they didn't really pay attention because, I hate to say it, but when you're working those hours, my mom and dad were both on quite a bit of drugs. So I had the repeated traumas, which were night terrors, and I was suffering through all of these other things, and I was hiding all of it. So the best place for me to hide was this memory warehouse that I was constructing, and that happened. I was with the carnival until I was 11. I found people in the carnival to help me, because the carnival is a mixing pot. It's a mixing pot of drugs, a mixing pot of life. Yes, I was the little girl who worked in the freak show, so I'm legitimately that person. I traveled with my family, but every time we stopped, I would go to the Romani freak show and lived with them while at that stop. And they taught me destiny. They taught me empowerment. They taught me acceptance of what I was going through, being part of a higher calling of the divine. They taught me a bonding of family that was beyond what my family had. So I wasn't obviously in school during all this, because you can't be in school when you're moving every 3 weeks to a month. So my education was based on whoever I hooked myself onto as a little girl, which I had voices who would scream bloody murder at me to keep me away from certain people, and then I'd attach myself to whatever person didn't get screaming in my head. So my voices had some benefits to them. They kept me away from really, really creepy people, for the most part. So I made it through the carnival without being too horribly, horribly hurt. Yeah, I did have a lot of fun though. But when we stopped traveling, my mom and dad sent me to my grandma's. And then they split up, moved, and didn't tell anybody where they moved, so I got stuck there. And my grandma didn't want me, so she sent me to live with some friends on the Apache land. And it was with the Apaches that I found a different set of spiritual tools. I was with the powwows, and I was with the shamans and the medicine, and they taught me to pay attention to everything. They found out that I had always seen wolves sleeping at the foot of my bed. So they said that that was my guardian spirit, and that I should pay respect to the wolves, and that every day I should consult the spirit and ask for guidance through my day, and that I would always be guided. And that as long as I was consulting the Great Spirit, everything would be guided. They also paid homage to all the directions, and all 4 directions had meanings tied to them. They were very significant. They had dancing, and they had colors, and they had energy, and they had love, and they had family. And I found peace and happiness here like no other. And they taught me to pay attention to the heartbeat of the earth. And it was great. It was beautiful. I found a family that were Fae. Now, as a kid, I thought they were just saying what they were saying, and then in college, I took a class and I found out that this is a real thing, that there are Irish Celtic families who have ancestries who a member of the family, female typically, has gone into the mist and come back pregnant, and so they believe that they have Fae blood. And this particular family has Fae blood. And so they have some quirks. And so they taught me Fae lore. And they taught me some things that stuck with me, that gifts are important. That I give gifts, and I give strange little weird gifts, and I also take gifts and they mean things to me. There are things on this table that I keep, and they mean things to me, and it's not necessarily because of monetary value, but it's because of the gifts. But if you want to make a deal with fairy, you need to be very careful. It's just like making a deal with a djinn. You need to understand contracts. But it's a great way to avoid an argument if you just agree that there's a fairy in your house. Because that's one of the things that my ex and I agreed. If there's a fairy in the house, then it doesn't matter who left the milk out. Just put some cookies out for the fairy. We figured out our fairy in our house likes chocolate. Our 5-year-old also likes chocolate. But if we just agreed that there's a fairy in the house, then it didn't matter if something went missing, if something was wrong, if the little things could be blamed on the fairy. And it was fantastic. It was just acceptable. So I find myself, just the other day I was telling my roommate, oh, this happened, and I'm like, oh, it sounds like you need to put out a saucer of milk and figure out what your fairy likes. And she's like, oh, yeah, I think I'll do that. And it's just, that's my common thing, and I didn't even realize that, I still go to that. So this family was the first truly, they were devoted Christians. They lived above the church that they were at. When I found them, I had just come from a pagan, Satanistic, straight up Satanistic home. And I totally studied and all that. And they took me in, skull ring, leather jacket, pentagrams, the whole 9 yards, and sat me down, gave me food, told me they loved me, said that I was their daughter, and I didn't leave for 4 years. Romanian gypsies. I started finding a pattern there. Sadly, Juliana has since passed away, and as has Daniela, and that actually has triggered a lot of my quest for enlightenment, and finding how Daniela and I shared a lot of the same traumas, but we coped in such different ways. And looking at how best to address that and how I can help not only myself but my peers, who I know of how many of us have chosen such a variety of coping skills, but at any point we can start the quest for enlightenment. The problem was that I thought that this was Christianity. And then when I left this church, I tried to find another church like it, and I never did. Never did. I found journaling because I thought maybe I could track the scatteredness of my brain. So this is 2.5 years worth of journaling for me. And if you journal, I really recommend you try to keep hold of your journals for at least 2 years, if you can. I still have these, and one of the first things I want to do when I get my new place is burn them. Because that is going to be part of my stepping into my new life, because when I look at these, that person, I don't know who she is anymore. But I've learned a lot by being able to go back and look at them. The ability to write down everything that's going on for me is part of how I was putting things into that memory warehouse. Literally, as I was writing things on the pages, I was writing things on pages in my memory warehouse. I pulled all those out one day so that I could find a pattern. And I found the pattern. I found a web that had been woven through, that I was unconsciously doing things. And then later on, I caught hold of it, and I was able to go back and find it. So for that, it was useful. So this is Sean. He's my soon-to-be ex-husband. And I'm currently right now, I'm about to do an interview with somebody who does twin flame and soulmate therapies. She coaches people through that intense love sensation. So through studying that, what I have figured out is that the 9 years that I spent with him is what's called a karmic situation. It's a time where not all of the time that I spent with him was good. Obviously, we're getting a divorce. But I spent time with him and I learned. I learned a great deal. Yes, all of those things you see up there are true. He was my teacher. He was my spiritual teacher as well as just my teacher in general. Yes, he was my master and my dom. A great deal of our relationship was a BDSM dominatrix relationship. That was how it started. Later, he became my partner and my husband. And yes, he is the father of my son. He was Catholic when we met, which meant that I became Catholic. And in the classes you take to become a Catholic, I told them, I'm okay with this because it's as close to being pagan as I can find. And they're like, yeah. He's now a Hermetic. And he ultimately was the original Chaos Mage. We'll go into that topic as soon as I get to the end of the slides. Through him and through the people that I met with him, I explored more and more of my spirituality than I ever had before. So, chaos magic. If you look it up, you're going to find names like Aleister Crowley. You're going to find Egyptian magic. You're going to find names like Thoth. Yeah, so this is a lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. I did this every morning before dawn. And this visual here is what you're imagining in your mind. And the diagram over here is the actual ritual itself. And people freak out about it, and yet all of it is very Christian Catholic, old. You're calling on the names of God. You're calling on the archangels, and you're calling on the directions, and you're calling on the elements. And I did this every morning with the middle pillar in order to cast everything out, create my own sanctified space, and then carry that space with me every day so that I could feel safe every morning. And that was my year of enlightenment that I did that. Like, this is later I found out, quote, high magic. But magic is, I feel what we make it. So, tarot. Tarot, I have several decks up here. Tarot is seen as being a very scary tool for some people. I use it as a processing tool. I see it as spiritual GPS. I've never used it to see the future. I think that there's entirely too many futures to be able to see the future. It lets me know where I'm at right now. I mean, you're applying meaning to what's there. The thing is that it's kind of scary for people when I'm telling you your meaning that you're seeing there and it's accurate. The thing is you can use a regular deck of cards because that's where it came from. It was a gambling game. The difference between a regular deck of cards and tarot cards is they have the Fool's Journey, which is the higher arcana. So, yeah, it directly translates as seen here. These are what each suit stands for. Wands are fire. Fire is your passion. It's your creativity. The pentacles are earth. Pentacles, coins. That's the same thing. The earth, that's your physical, that's your job, that's your money, that's opportunities, it's grounding. Swords are earth. It's your intellect, your thinking, your words. That whole arc is seen as kind of scary because our thoughts are kind of the scariest things we have. And water is emotion. It's your psychic. It's your intuition. My first tarot reading I ever had, the card that represents who you are was the Queen of Cups in reverse. That's the watery side of water in reverse. I was coveting all of my dark emotions. And I said, I need to fix that. And I see the Queen of Cups as being a peer support person. She is the watery side of water. She's in control of emotions. She accepts good and bad emotions, and she's there holding the cup, reflecting back to you. You see what you want to see, and she's there to walk with you. And so that was my goal, to become the Queen of Cups. And so that has been my archetype, one of my cards that I have always aimed for. This is the part that gets added to a regular deck of cards, that if you use a regular deck of cards, you're missing out on these cards. And this is the Higher Arcana. This is shown through the Kabbalistic Tree of Life as the 4 stages, and it's the Fool's Journey, the hero's journey. And as I said, a good journey is you don't always get it all of it in order, which is why there's a good shuffle. This breaks each of the cards down, and again, I have several decks up here, including the art that's up here is the Rider-Waite, and so I have the Rider-Waite deck. That's just your basic deck. But every artist has their flavor on the deck. And that's just because you can find angel decks, you can find creative cartoony decks, you can find dark decks. And it's because they're adding their own emotions to it. And so I have a deck here that's really poetic. And so I have probably 14 different decks, and depending on who I'm reading for, I'll feel like I need to use a different deck, and it will give a different reading. And that's just entirely, like, this is the most honest deck I have, and it's called the Revelations deck. And it will be brutally honest, but it will also be incredibly accurate. And that is something that I don't understand how it works. And there are several, like, I've done readings for Christians who do not believe in tarot, and it's been completely accurate. And I can change the way the cards read if you need me to. If you want me to call the sun, as in Jesus Christ, it fits the reading. But I always invite people to call bullshit. Yeah. I've never had somebody call bullshit, but they've always had an opportunity to have a conversation with their own soul. Almost done here. Stones. There's a lot of stones up here. If you don't believe that stones carry energy, look into a circuit board. They have crystals in them because crystals carry, and yeah. So depending on how you look up a stone will depend on what you find. The stones that are under the 5 healings are also under their meanings, and they are going to say different things. Those stones are also up here. I keep amethyst in the room because it is known for getting rid of negative energy, getting rid of nightmares. If I'm having a bad migraine, I'll take a bath and I'll put a big chunk of amethyst in the water with me. And you can say it's placebo effect if you like. I'm a big fan of the placebo effect. But it helps. I also have giant chunks of the rose quartz up here. But I also had to learn how to align my chakras. As I was working with healing my body, I figured out what in my body was sick while I was working with somebody who knew about chakras. And when I was working through chakras, I found out how they're connected through various spiritualities. So I literally have stones up here that are specifically attuned to chakras. And they're missing a few pieces because while I was going through some severe sicknesses, literally crystals shattered in my hands while giving no pressure to them. And those were the parts that needed to be fixed. Before I had a total hysterectomy, I had a crystal shattered. I was suffering some very bad things with my uterus and my cervix, and I felt like giving me some very, very big, hey, pay attention. And I went, and yeah, I was precancerous and had a lot of growths, and I had to have a total hysterectomy. And now I am fine. But, like, I had no idea what was going on other than I'd had pain since I was 14. But I had pain since I was 14, so I wasn't paying attention to it. Baphomet. Okay, so no, I did put this in here. I was questioning putting this in here because people see Baphomet as being such a scary symbol. It's used in Satanism, and that's why I actually decided to put in. Baphomet is considered a pagan deity. It's balance. Salve and coagula. Salve, to dissolve, coagula, to bring together. It is masculine, it is feminine, it is air, it is fire, it is man, it is beast. Baphomet was created by a person who was into spirituality a long, long time ago. Baphomet is a drawing that represents what we want it to represent and who has been taken over by mass media and is used as a symbol of Satanism, but was originally a symbol of balance. And depending on where you study, is going to depend on what you find, and that's true about everything. You find what you look for. And that's why I threw him up here, is because you're going to find what you look for. So, Baphomet. I love Baphomet, even though he's seen as being so terrible. And then the 4 corners. 5 in the pentacle. I literally got in school suspension for drawing one of these on the ground. And it's earth, air, fire, water, spirit, circle of protection. Which I was told that it was the symbol of Satanism. And it's so completely not. So I just thought I'd throw this up here. And my whole thing is I'm very anti-stigma about mental health, but also spirituality. Like, if you look into the roots of things, a lot of people are afraid of things because they've been told you need to be afraid of things. I'm schizoaffective. If you don't know anything about what a schizophrenic is, you would be afraid of me because I might kill you. That's what people think. I've literally been told that. Like, I was in a taxi with somebody and they found out we were talking about it, and I said that I was schizoaffective, and they're like, do I need to be concerned right now? Were you 2 minutes ago? So if you don't know anything, then you only have what you've been told. I'm very pro-education, obviously. It's not the scary, horrifying thing that I was told it was when I was a child. Sacred geometry. This is what it's supposed to look like. That's what I drew. So this is both creative and logical. And when you do creative and logical at the same time, it forces both parts of your brain to work at the same time. And they say that that is unlocking parts of your brain because it's forcing them to work together. Another way of doing this is mandalas because of symmetry. But they say that once you have successfully drawn this, and I did this with coins and a ruler, so it's not perfect. They say that it's supposed to help you open and unlock things in creativity and logic. So if you ever get time and you're interested in finding some fun things, there are mandala templates, and try some sacred geometry. And it's literally, the background is what I see in my dreams the most. And it's my visualization of enlightenment that I wanted to just throw in there because it's the end. What I have up here is tools. There are things up here, and I have room for questions. So, do people have questions? I've said that I believe that I have mental health issues. And I believe I have spiritual experiences. I have celiac disease, and if I'm exposed to gluten, I will have tactile sensations. I will hear echoes of my trauma, which I know are distinctly echoes of my trauma. I know a migraine's coming on because I hear a baby screaming like they've had a hammer dropped on their foot. That is not part of my spiritual experience. That is an echo of some trauma going on. I will wake up from a night terror and see my abuser standing in the room, and that he's not interacting with me. He's just standing there. So one of the books that I've read is called Hallucinations, and it talks about how in mental health, hallucinations don't interact with you. They happen to you. And in spiritual and in schizophrenia, which I go to hearing voices groups, and I find somebody who has a spiritual experience also has a schizophrenia diagnosis. Funny how that works out. They interact with their hallucinations. So I also have spirit guides. Now, my relationships with my spirit guides have definitely changed throughout my existence. But I also have, I've had a spirit guide who's been there for 5 years, who my relationship with them has come to a close. And then I have a spirit guide who's been there for 20 years. And when they're not there, I have a very distinct feeling like he's off doing his own thing, and I wish that there was a cell phone that I could figure out. And I'm not entirely sure there's not. I just haven't figured it out yet. I gotta figure out how to pick up the phone, and I'm sure that there's some astral way to do that I'm just not doing. And honestly, right now, I am attempting to practice atheism and failing at it. Because to me, it takes more faith to be an atheist than it does to be a pagan or a Christian. Because my default is to believe in something, to believe in a grand plan, to believe in energy. And I personally think that electricity never stops, energy never stops. Even when my heart stops, the energy will keep going on. And stars have been there since the beginning of time, so. And since I have stepped into the mentality of, I've already lived through hell secretly, and then stepped into small little pockets of people who also have been experiencing these things. And since I've been living out loud, I've had a more successful life, a more happy life than ever before. So I have mixed feelings about reincarnation because I don't know. And I'm not going to pretend that I know. I have hopes, but at the same time, I'm not going to get any confirmation, really. I've had death experiences, and I have memories of experiences from those. I don't know if that's a waiting chamber. I know that people I've talked to who've had death experiences have had similar experiences, But I got to come back, so I don't know if, like, that was my brain continuing to play through electricity. But at the point that I'm at, if nothing happens with my brain, because if my memories are my brain, and my energy is who I am, and my energy goes on into a tree, then I get to go on as a tree, I'm good. If my existence as in consciousness does not go on, I'm good. I'm okay. If the idea of my energy recycling with a consciousness goes through, I've had somebody who, when I was younger, knew all of the stuff that I had gone through, and their response to that was, you must have been like a dog that ate babies or something, because there's some karma debt going on. And that was that cursed birth thing that, like, I felt like I was paying other people's karma. I felt like I was paying all of my past family's karma, or maybe I had done something or something. And I literally, when I turned 30, I was like, I can't believe that anymore. I have to stop, because I was continuing to manifest that in my world. So I don't know. And I'm okay with not knowing. I've had experiences where before somebody called me to let me know somebody passed, I either received a visit from them or received a visit from a family member. And I know other people in this room who have too. And so, like I said, I don't know. But at the same time, that's where that chaos part comes in, because I straddle the lines on a lot of things, and that's just something I accept about myself. And I could blame it on the fact that I also feel like I live in multiple realities. So, I mean, I just accept multiple things at the same time. And it allows me to have conversations with a lot of people at the same time. So, yeah. And meditation, I'm going to admit meditation is not for everybody. Meditation evolved for me. It was one thing when I was a kid, another thing when I was a teenager, and totally different now. Like I said, when I was on the Apache land, they helped me realize that I had always been seeing wolves, and so wolves were there. So I have one spirit guide who literally I mistook as a human. It was that solid for me. And then Juliana was like, I had gone over and talked to this being, and he like would not shake my hand, would not talk to me, would not nothing, just looked at me like I was a weirdo, and would look where I would gesture. And then I came back over and I'm like, what the heck, he's such an asshole. And she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, he wouldn't talk to me, he wouldn't shake my hand, nothing. And she's like, well, spirits are like that sometimes. And I had a total panic attack because I realized she just sent me across the street to talk to somebody she couldn't see. But she encouraged me, this is during my devout, holy roller, evangelical Christian days, that this was part of my walk. I was meant to help spirits, and that I needed to talk to him to figure out why he was here, and that I was blessed by God, and that I had the armor of God, and that angels were with me, and that she was praying, and the church was praying, and that I needed to speak to him, even though nobody else could see him. And it felt like a scene from a scary movie. Like, I remember walking by him because I was too embarrassed to be talking to somebody nobody else could see, even though everybody knew I could see angels and demons. And I'm like, meet at the parking lot after dark. And I'm like, and I've developed a relationship with a guy nobody could see slowly, and he never passed on. And eventually I figured out he was there to help me. He was pissed about all the same things I was. And so we could go together at night and talk and gripe and work through stuff that I could say to him that nobody else I could say. And so he was basically my first real peer support person. And he's still there, but he's kind of not around right now. He's only around every once in a while, but I also don't need him that much now. I know I have beings that, like, I feel like I can hear them, but I don't see them. But I also, that's associated with a meditation that I've done for going to the Akashic Library, which is a different set of meditations that I walked through, that I was having incredibly, incredibly emotional instability. And Sean identified that if I stopped and I meditated, I felt better. But I was going to a Buddhist meditation group, and every time I meditated, I ended up in a library. But when I would come back, I could see glowing under certain people's pillows. And I was like thinking, the lights are kind of cool effect. There aren't any lights in here. I'm seeing auras. This is kind of freaking me out. I'm not ready for this. But he said, no, I needed to keep going back to the library. I was being called by the librarian. So I would do library volunteer work, was what it wound up being. And similar to when I was a kid going into my memory warehouse, I would meditate, allow the space to manifest around me. I didn't control it. I just let it manifest around me. And then I did the same kind of volunteer work I did as a kid, at shelving books and accepting the fact that this was my space I was going to be in, and knowing that it was a space in my head. And while I was there were people that were there who I could hear talking. And now those people I can hear talking even when I'm not meditating. And I hear them as being my guides now. So that is an experience that, like, I get that if I tell a therapist that's a hallucination and a delusion. But it's helped me. And those guides literally can give me names of people that I can go look up and they're real. They can give me articles to go read that are real. They can tell me, go look up this topic, and it's real. They can guide me through different points that I don't have any idea about it, but it's real. So how I've gotten to it has been kind of different for me, but ultimately I accept that meditation isn't for everybody. If you're not okay in your headspace, going into your headspace alone is scary. So if you're not okay meditating, then, don't. But if you are, it's a good practice to be able to develop. And if it's practice that you want to develop and you're not okay with it now, find somebody that you trust to meditate with. That way, if you get triggered by your own mind, you're with somebody you're safe with. Because that was something that I have gone through as well. When you're alone with your thoughts and alone with your trauma, you can get triggered. And I want to say that, I went through kind of for a time it was a crisis, without going into too many details. One of the things that will happen to me when I'm in a very dark space is I will see horrifying graphic things, repeated, like on a loop. I was seeing things happening on a loop. And then I saw this thing actually happen, but because I had been seeing it happen, I thought that it was just another hallucination. And then I went home. I just walked away from it. And then when I was at home, I got a call that said, "Hey, did you hear this thing happened?" And I was like, that was real? I actually witnessed this thing happen and walked away from it thinking that it was fake, that it was just in my head, and I hated myself for a while because I witnessed somebody die thinking it was a hallucination. And how horribly off do you have to be to watch somebody die and think it's a hallucination? And then later, somebody who turned out to know the person was like, "You were having premonitions of it." And it's like, why, if I couldn't stop it?
Right.
And they were like, imagine if you hadn't have had those premonitions and you had known that it was actually happening at the time, how horribly traumatized you would have been. Instead of being able to walk away from the scene and go home and be in a safe space where you could find out in a safe space. See, and that's the thing, is I don't always understand why a premonition, and I don't always need to understand. Like I said, for a long time, beat myself up about it, but then later on it was like, no, he was right. If I hadn't have thought that it was a hallucination, I would have been worse off having known what was actually going on. I would have been probably hospitalized that night, whereas I managed to be in a safe space to find out what was actually going on, because there was nothing I could have done. But somehow it took another person being clued into what was going on to be able to help me see what was going on, which is another reason why I share what's going on in my world now, because I need a fresh view. I need other. Shaman is on my business card, right next to peer support person, because I accept that I'm a modern shaman, and there are several other modern shamans that are around. Because there were some questions that I wanted to ask and introduce you guys to ask yourself. We don't have to have answers for them, but if you're an empath and you don't know it as a child, and you're being bombarded by other people's feelings and you think you're your own, and you get drugged because you were given an antidepressant for that, and you're not being taught how to filter, how to block, how to deal with that idea that these are not my emotions, it's okay to let them have their emotions and me have mine, then it's a double whammy to be psychically aware of everybody's emotions and drugged. So if that's a possibility that that's actually happening, I think that if we could accept that that might be a possibility and then put them with somebody who also believes with that, who can teach them how to handle that, and at least give that an opportunity to work and see if it works, that we could probably have a lot less kids being medicated. Also, if psychics are real and people are capable of manifesting things, and that is seen as mental illness, and so we give them medication, put them all in the same building together, tell them that they're sick and broken. If you look at where those buildings are on a map, the cities where those buildings are the cities that struggle the hardest. Because as long as I believed that I was sick, as long as I believed there was something wrong with me, as long as I believed that bad things were going to happen, they did. And I don't know how much of that was because I was being told it, and so I manifested it. So what if the most powerful manifesting mages we have are being told to manifest bad things, and so they are? What if we just lived in a world where we accepted that maybe it's real, and if we treated it like it's real and gave it a shot before we treated it like it wasn't, how much harm could come? I mean, yes, there are a few who are going to be still struggling and still need medication and still need help, but there are going to be some who can come out of it without needing medication, without needing to be housed. And I think that if we can make a success out of that, then it'd be great.
And thank you for listening to the Three Voices podcast. We'd love for you to be a part of the conversation. So if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to us at our Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, or through Gmail. Until next time, don't forget to take care of yourself and each other.